case and then try to figure out a simple business case, trying to apply the concept we learned. That's basically what we will try to do in the afternoon, so in the longer afternoons, because it takes a little bit more time. And I would like to hear feedback from you, which is very important also for the final exam. The way you think and you figure out a possible solution to a situation of distress or a situation of difficulty that an organization may have. So please, when I ask a question, take part of the course, okay? You want to hear all the same people that is sitting in the first two row, but everybody if it's possible, okay? Sometimes. At least 3-4 times, no more. So first of all, let me share this or better. Okay. So we were talking last time about the way mainly strategy sees the world from the perspective of a company. If you put in an inner circle a company or organization, is the same. We are talking about a community of persons focused towards a mission and a vision. So it doesn't really matter if it's for profit or no profit. It's an organization. The inner circle and the orange circle is where, as if you recall, you have an immediate effect, a possible effect. It doesn't say that you solve your problems, or it doesn't say that 100% the people in the orange circle will do, what you hope they will do, but you have a strong chance that that is going to happen. So it's rather logical if you think that you are a large company, for instance, or a company that is either not large but located in an area, in a territory, where it's very important, has a larger influence, that it may have a substantial influence on suppliers, local suppliers, or you may have influence on buyers, buyers or customers as well. And that's probably substitute products, competitors. They will look at you as kind of mirror to see their performance, to judge their performance. Anyway, if you are in the orange circle, you may think that if there is a problem, you can be the first one to settle or to try to settle the problem. And in general, is what people expect from you. You had a bunch of suppliers and you want to settle a new contract. The initiative is up to the company, of course. You want to change strategically the relationship with customers or buyers. It's rather logic that you make the first step in order to do that. Unless, as we have seen, there is not the other way around because there is a problem. So some one of these categories raise a problem. There is an accident, there is an incident. There is a problem concerning product or services you supply. Then it's the other way around. But it's logical to think and to assume that in the orange circle, you do what you do for first. You take the initiative. You're shaping that environment. We say that the outer circle, the microenvironment, is not like that, or at least is not like that for everyone. Quite a few may think that they may have such an influence on the market to influence themselves sociocultural factor or sociological factor or environmental factors. Most of the times, you are the victim, in brackets, of those factors. Pandemic, a war, is not something you can avoid on your own. So you are, it doesn't say that you have to be passive, if you recall, but it's rather logical that the arrows or the blue area are pointing towards you, and it's quite a few things you can do to change that. The only logical thing you may expect to do is to react, to adapt. That is something that for sure you have to do. Please notice that the strength and the danger, also the opportunity, that is brought from the blue azure factors is as big as you are not able to act proactively. And acting proactively is the absence of strategy. We said at the very beginning that a strategist wants to have a scenario, no? Scenario that is reliable. What is going to happen if? What is going to happen in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and so on? If you have a good scenario, is rather logical, at least it's possible that you are going to anticipate the effect of the outer circle. You may expect that, and it's logical. There are things you cannot expect, nevertheless. You cannot expect a pandemic. You may think of a scenario with pandemic, but if you are in 2020, that will be probably high impact and very low likelihood in your analysis. After 2 years, you say, oh, pandemic, it happens everywhere, every time. But 2 years ago, it wasn't like that. So for many, many, many scenarios, that was a very, very low, high effect, low probability characteristic. Generally speaking, there are things you can proactively anticipate if you are careful enough in a strategic analysis. So for instance, that explains why large consumer-based organizations put a lot of effort in trying to understand the way we think, the way we buy, the way we get dressed, what we eat, what we are interested in, to try to anticipate sociocultural forces. Anticipating means not forecast with 100% or likelihood, but at least to have an idea where the market is going. Legal and regulatory forces is also a game. You know, perhaps that things like public, let's say, regulatory affairs, public affairs, and lobbying do exist in all advanced economies. So in Washington, next door to the president's office, there are the lobbyist offices. Like in Brussels, the same. That people is there in order to anticipate, or as much as they can proactively anticipate the effects of the microenvironment concerning legal and regulatory affairs on their business. So that is all branch of area where it's possible that if you are a large organization, or if you are belonging to a group or organization that are doing the same business you are doing, you have the chance to modify or orientate the legislative action of the regulator in your advantage. There are laws for that, no? There are regulations for that. If you come to political factors, the thing becomes even more sketchy. There are regulations for that. You know that as an organization, you can finance politics if you respect the law. In some countries, this is possible. In some countries, this is possible with limits and so on. In that area, what you hope to have is to have a favorable orientation or government towards you. But there's not much more that you can do. You can try to do that if you have the chance. Most of the times, political factors are over possibilities that, for instance, small and medium-sized business may have. Economic conditions, that for sure is over possibility. So economical trends is something you can, with flexibility, try to anticipate or reduce the effect. How? Managing risk. No? You probably will do whole courses or exam concerning financial risk. So this is an area where you may have and may put your efforts in order to do something. But it's still an area over the chance of a single organization to go against the market. There are quite a few cases that is going to happen. Most of the times is against it. Technological forces. Technological forces are increasingly more difficult for organizations to forecast because we are in a moment of sudden change. If you notice strategically, it's quite interesting enough. Technology is the only area that is going somehow against the way, let's say, history, in the sense that if you look at our society 30, 40 years ago, generally speaking, opera was substituted by other kind of music, jazz, rock, and so on. Every fashion was changing the landscape and overcoming the other. The same in politics, no? Ideologies, currents, and so on. Every time we're changing and substituting what was before. Then it changed in our society. Nowadays, we are formed and we are ethically convinced of the fact of not excluding anybody, no? So it's much more inclusive society. Technology stayed the same. Is in an environment where every new wave is excluding the other in terms of software, in terms of capacity of elaborating data, and so on. And that is happening with new generations that are continuously on the market every 6 months, 1 year, even less. So this is an area where probably the only one where that is not inclusive, is exclusive. If you are not following the right way, may exclude you, in other words, from the market, if you are not following the right path, or if you are choosing the wrong path. But the time you have to choose, evaluate, buy, and implement technology in your business goes much, much slower than the advances of technology. So this area is definitely an area, probably the area where nowadays is more difficult from the point of view of the company in the green circle to understand what to do. Because the logic, you can that way think, the logical investment is a few years ahead. The time it takes to shape your organization, to implement technology, and then to have the results, we are talking about years. Training costs months. New generations of technologies are already on the market. This is tremendously affecting areas nowadays, like, for instance, just to say one, energy. If you are now programming what to do concerning an energetic strategy of a country organization, you are in big troubles, because you are still with the pressure of some stakeholders that are recommending sustainable kind of energies. But on the other side, you have a tremendous pressure of consumer that want the product now, no matter what. So also with definitely not sustainable kind of energies. So you are strategically in under pressure from two opposite sides, and absolutely not easy to decide which technology, which investments to make. The same energy applied to logistics. You are a big logistic firm and you have to decide which kind of technology. Electric, okay, let's go electric. At the moment, anyway, electric engines, especially for trucks, are weighing more than 1 ton, 1/2 ton, which is a lot. Diesel, probably, is the only good alternative for 20 or 30 years. But at the other side, if we don't start, we'll never arrive to the point to have a substitution. What to do? Which kind of technology pick it up? And then the reflection on raw materials, because batteries are done with materials and stuff that is in China and Russia at the moment. It's difficult. So technology, picking up technology, make a choice that is reliable, changing and shifting suppliers accordingly, training people, have also some alternative if something goes wrong. It's very difficult. So technology is definitely one of the areas. In every field where the organization have more difficulties and also more worries about the strategic line to take within 5 years, 10 years, is not that easy, the game. It's a paradox, I know, but perhaps it's easier to understand the needs of consumers and the way they behave at the moment. There are more dollars. The change is lower. The path of change is lower. So, just to let you understand that the game is played in the outer sphere is definitely not easy. I didn't mention the competitors. Here is written rival firms and new entrants categories. Competitors is something you may have an influence, of course, they are competitors, so you are competing, you have an influence, of course, you are playing a game with them. You may win or lose, but you are interacting. But consider, for instance, the dynamic of a new entrant, newcomer, whatever you want to call it, that is coming maybe from the outer circle. Because it's somebody that since the day before, since yesterday was doing something completely different, then bam, decide to enter in the market. Because the entry barrier are lower or because they have a new substitute product. Is something that is crossing the barrier and is entering in your orange area. And then you have to do something against it. The concept of substitute product is something you know, I think, no? You already studied, or not? Give a sign. Yes, okay, so substitute product, if you were to define it. Train, airplane, for instance. For instance. Okay, so new entrant comes with a product that has a completely different logic. Maybe the newcomer is coming from a group which is larger than you. So they have what are called scale and scope economy. They have larger facilities, lower cost for workforce, better IT system, perhaps. So a larger, broader line of products to sell together with the product you are busy with. This is something that is in between, for instance. It's something you can deal with, yes, but also not. As a larger group, probably not. You can deal with it partially. In an area where you are a leader or where you have the possibilities. That's the story of everyday competition. I brought you the example of Procter & Gamble. At the moment you have a multinational that cuts 2/3 of the product and decide to focus only on some product. You are, as a local producer, you for sure worried, because you have all the power concentrated on the multinational, you are producing only one thing, and they are producing still 173. So for instance, when it comes to on-shelf policy, you go to your buyers, great distributors of product, of course they have most powerful on-shelf policies than you have. So you have to count on quality, you have to count on the reputation of your product, but still it's something you can partially deal with, not totally. So the components of a strategic environment are such, and they're changing according to circumstances. Sometimes the same factor may be a risk or an advantage. For instance, legal and regulatory effect, no, is something that you have is against you because, for instance, somebody decides at the highest level, political level, that what you are producing is polluting the environment. So new taxes is against you. But may come also from the inner circle. Let's say the three of you here in front have the only 3 producers of a certain product, and you decide to raise the barrier to defend yourself. How? Having a regulation that is not against the law. No, let's have a regulation. That regulation raise barriers for newcomers because they have to pay to something that you know by heart, because you're standing in the market since years, perhaps. So the same factor may come from 2 different sides, and according from where it comes from, is an advantage or a risk or an opportunity, both things. So that's a good way to look at things, because it is exactly what all standards, certification standard ask at the very beginning. If you do a non-financial report, the first thing that you are asked to do is a matrix of this mapping stakeholders, effect, and counter effects. If you are certifying and go against ISO 9000 standards, the first thing you are asked to map is the general environment and the context. Chapter 5 of the standard. So is what everybody asks, because there is a logic behind. If you, from the way you are, look at a good pair of glasses or a cheap one, no? If you are able to view clearly what is in front of you or what is around you, it's very much possible that all the rest, so the analysis, the appreciation of risk, and so on, are also reliable. If this part is sketchy, you may be a successful enterprise, but that in the eyes of an investor or a consumer represent more an accident than a reliability. Say they were successful, but they were also very lucky because they didn't analyze the environment. So that's what you are called to do when it comes to everything goes under the name of strategy. So external, internal factors. Concerning, for instance, a point, sociocultural cultural forces. That's also a very interesting area because it's true. Nowadays, you study for sure in marketing instruments that gives you the possibility, I wouldn't say one by one, but very near to that, to study the behavior of consumers. And those are available. So it's only a matter of money and capacity to elaborate them. Those data there are. Metadata coming from download of every kind of applications. Data coming from payment instruments. Data coming from customer satisfaction instrument. Data coming from traffic, logistics, and so on. All together, they are able to do that. No, there are wonderful evidences of that since Cambridge Analytica and so on case. There are a lot of cases where this was used or even abused for every kind of means. But there is one point that even those forecasts are not necessarily exact, are not necessarily able to anticipate every movement. I would say thanks to God, but still unpredictable. But socio-cultural forces are changing very often, and they are changing on a local basis. And sometimes the rules on local basis are against each other. Because they had to deal with not only with lifestyles, also with every kind of ideal value that populations in the world have towards society, towards inclusion, towards religion, whatsoever. And as you know, read any newspaper, sometimes they're against each other. And that brings sometimes companies also to make huge mistakes. The case of Dolce & Gabbana in China is an example of a couple of years ago, but there are many, where even the use of words can be offensive for someone. No, you are picking up a word that has particularly negative meaning somewhere, or you are promoting a product against the sensitivity or the beliefs of a certain area of the world. It happens. It happened and will happen, for sure. So it's a hard task, and it's something that you can shape, and you are also shaped by. The game is more and more mutual. The fact that companies strategically are looking always to a massive dialogue with consumers, you know, and at the other side, consumers, we in general, we are interested to know more and more about what we buy, what we use. Defines a mutual change. The success of companies which use the concept of crowd in the process of sourcing money and ideas, and in the process of delivering products and services, is growing. Companies, I say, where the socio-cultural factor is CEO. So the company is a platform which is providing means in order to have a match between all these informations and requests. Airbnb, the biggest real estate society, no estate owned. Uber, no cars owned. Facebook, now less, but no journalists hired. So areas where company, very large, gives the environment in order to have sociocultural forces which represent their interest and need and content and exchange them. And what they make available: logistics, IT, design, marketing. Sorry? Platforms, exactly. So the era of the platform is explained very well by the growth of sociocultural factors and the fact that those sociocultural factors are no more isolated, but with the help of the net are available. The time it took to have, you can see very well considering what happened in the last wars and the time it took to mobilize people for this war that's currently happening. Few days in order to have people at the frontier bringing goods and services. The exchange of ideas much quicker than before. So definitely time to adapt for companies which is becoming shorter in every field. And also the possibility, the space for new kind of businesses. Also against this revolution, because the part of this revolution sometimes is impressive, but is also very problematic. So areas of the market that voluntarily, mandatory are choose different, let's say, old-fashioned way to meet the needs of people that don't recognize themselves in this speed, in this way of exchanging values or attitudes. Anyway, an area which is very complicated. Economic conditions. Economic condition, if you read the manuals, only the manual, take Thomson. No, it's not necessary that you pick up other manuals and you see that the definition that here standing in front of me. Economic conditions include the general economic climate and specific factors such as interest rates, exchange rates, the inflation rate, the unemployment rate, the rate of economic growth, the regulation of the national banking systems, the market of stocks and bonds, the payment systems. Fantastic definition. Now think about cryptocurrencies, peer-to-peer system of payments, electronic system of payments. Boom. You have a different system. Different factors to follow, and very difficult to follow. The strategy of the Russian bank, the Russian central bank at the moment concerning cryptocurrency. Take a look. It's something that is an asset that strategically wasn't there before, and it's completely different the way you strategically look at these factors. My business is all based on cryptocurrencies. Okay. In electronic payments, fantastic. The logic of planning, tax planning, planning those resources, employing those resources, receiving those resources, covering the risk of fluctuation of those resources, the value of those currencies, completely different. And even the stakeholders you're related with are not necessarily anymore banking systems. Maybe also private system or electronic system. Completely different relationship, completely different stakeholders. So also economical conditions are changing, and we live in an era of fluctuation. Probably your children will live in the area which is where things are already somehow settled. We live in an era of change where the logic of some system is still the one of the 90s or the 80s. The logic of other system is the year of 200 years later in the future. Some system is in between. And the relationship between all this fluctuation is not clear anymore. So strategy is even more important in this sense, and the 6 components of the microenvironment are even more complicated, because what made sure my generation, the generation before, is not sure anymore. But some trends are anyway there. So considering companies strategically as part of society is not anymore in discussion. We feel companies are part of our life. They ask for that, but now they have to pay also for that. Because considering part, we recognize more brands than faces, no? All of us recognize between 600 and 700 brands. But you don't recognize the face of 600 persons. So they are part of our family. A part of our family, they can make us happy or angry. So they make us angry, maybe a problem for them. It needs to be settled. So one thing is clear. Companies are part of our life, our society, and the more and more they will be. So they need definitely to respond to a set of ethical values where the things we have seen, vision, mission, etc., not anymore wars, are concretely part of their business. It can be different. The fact that technology will play and plays an important role, that's definitely sure. The fact that towards the concept and the incredibly high and wide concept that sustainability became environment is important is also something is sure. So there are at least 3, 4, or 6 components of microenvironment that are increasingly important. But how to deal with it, it depends more and more specifically on the business where you are. Rules based on, let's say, on belonging to a particular geographical area or belonging to particular kind of sharing particular ideals or sharing specific political view of the world is less and less important. No? Here in Italy, the association strategically done of companies in clusters, according to, for instance, conservative or more socialistic oriented vision of the world, what were called the white clusters and the red clusters. Association with global organizations and so on is perceived as less and less important, no? Because the specific needs that a company has are really becoming extremely specific, and it's difficult to group them in clusters. Every company basically nowadays, even if it's here in Siena and selling oil, is talking with the whole world. So may face somehow the same problems that Amazon has, being a more size company, and then a specific local problems. The combination of those problems depends a lot on their specificity, in the kind of customers they have, where the customers are located, the way they are promoting their product. That is becoming following the concept of unicity. We said in the first lecture. Michael Porter said, don't be the best, be unique, and so on. The logical consequence is exactly this. So think about this scheme as a really important thing to understand. Because once you are in a company, you understand this, I won't say that your job is over, but it's much easier. You have the complete view of what is going on. Therefore, it's also easier to make choices, to suggest choices. And try always to connect the dots, not seeing the things separately, but connected as in reality are. Okay, so the external environment is very important. According to this vision, Michael Porter, which I just mentioned, came to the conclusion that there are at least what are called the 5 competitive forces, which are shaping the competitive framework. So, in the inner circle, he tried to make a conclusion that there are 5 areas where it can positively interact with competitors. And he defined competition according to this general idea of being the best, no? Still in this phase, as supplier bargaining power, the power of newcomers and competitors, the power of substitution of product, and the power of customers. And according to this vision, he made a model, which is probably one of the most popular and widespread models, in order to identify the orange area. Let's start from there. The approach was not only to have this view, but also to suggest companies what to do in order to diminish this pressure, to deal with this pressure, or to neutralize this pressure. So, first concept, the 5 forces are not important, as we currently on what we just said, they are not so important for everyone in the same way and in the same order. If you are a pharmaceutical society and you are selling a drug which is quite successful, you know by heart that it will take from 5 to 10 years to competitor to have a product similar to the one you have. The success of Viagra were enjoyed by the company who produced it for many years before there were other products looking like Viagra. Okay, so perhaps the idea that a newcomer comes and push you aside on the market or really brings you troubles is not so important. Anyway, coming back to the definition of competitive advantage, even in that case, the competitive advantage represented by the fact that, oh, I'm the only one, I have Viagra on the market, should be used in order to produce other competitive advantages. Because the moment when a competitor will be as efficient as you are in order to do something, will come anyway. So you have to produce other advantages in different areas or improvements in order to diminish the future weight of this area. Okay? As your colleagues say, substitute products. That is a part that Porter analyzed carefully, because the concept of substitute product and strategy is really strange. It depends on the attitude of consumers. There are things that are logic and things that are a little bit less logic or not really clear in their phenomenology. If you are standing in Rome and you want to go to Milan, it's rather logic that a high-speed train will represent a substitute product concerning ethylene hydride for many reasons. And they're all logic. Time, the fact that you are entering the center of the town without need to move, to transfer from the airport, which is in general located far away from the center, into the center. Controls, no? You need to carry more stuff with you. Other things like that. Logic. already, if we enter in the concept of wine beer that was mentioned, logic, but combined with other effects. Wine, beer, not always easy to understand if really they are substitute product, yes or not, because it depends on the circumstances, it depends on the culture, or the area where you're selling, depends on food, and depends on occasion and so on. Technology, even more difficult. No? Substitute product. There are companies who lost definitely the breakthrough with their market because they didn't understand that a product could be really a substitute of another one. Read to the way the first phones, the first portable phones were considered. Also the attempt that Apple did creating App Store, no? Creating a new generation of product. Somebody believes, somebody else not. The fact that the product may represent in the eyes of the consumer possible substitutes sometimes is very difficult to understand. The mistake you can do in evaluation are not only considering the product, but also the fact that, generally speaking, you are thinking that your consumer is faithful and your consumer is lazy, or at least that's what you learn in the business school. No, consumer is lazy. As soon as he gets used to use of a product or a platform, it takes time before he or she wants to shift to another different use. But the opposite is also true. Customer is curious. Customer is not always so faithful. So the fear and the risk of a substitute product should be considered even in a market that is particularly mature, or even in a market that has a low rate of innovation. It may happen. So this risk is always there. Suppliers. Suppliers are extremely important in different ways and different means. For sure, if you look at what happened since at least the 80s, the progressive but constant rate of creation of marketplaces. Marketplace of big multinational companies, or places owned by several companies together. Think about the automotive field, where there are marketplaces that are even shared by competitors. And what you have there, you have strategic suppliers. And this is an extremely complicated game in strategy, and also interesting to see because the logic of controlling or dealing with suppliers change from time to time. The trend is to include them in your value generation process as much as you can, but the way to do it change from time to time. When you talk about integration with suppliers, there have been trends in the past. There are trends nowadays in certain markets where integration means buying, acquiring, merging with the suppliers. Why? Because you have the complete control of all your line of production, from raw materials and so on, the control of quality, and you're really worried that somebody enters in the market and steals your best suppliers. So you are available to pay a price, financial price, in order to fully integrate your value generation process from A to Z. There are areas where strategically they look like the general and overall company of the beginning of the last century. So after 100 years, this logic of integrating everything and controlling everything. There is another logic, which is the opposite, controlling towards alliances and contracts. So outsourcing, purchasing products and so on, not acquiring suppliers, but creating a marketplace and very strong contracts. Maybe extremely favorable. And that the name of the game is more and more based on two principles strategically: service level agreement and audit. So on one side, the possibility to have service level agreement and levels of concerning all the quality, the quantity, the time of purchase material, so that practically the company, your company, is guaranteed and won't have or any risk or quite a few risks in the year to come from that side. And at the other side, audit. So the capacity of hiring an external or let an internal area grow, able to perform audits, second part audits on suppliers in order to control their performance. When suppliers play a very important role for you, of course, when there are quite a few, when maybe they are larger than you, so they can make their own choices. The relative weight of your contracts, overall contracts, in their global revenue is fraction. Even if you shift to another supplier, if you can, they're not so worth it. In that sense, the bargaining power of suppliers is very high. Or areas like in automotive supplies like Brembo, for instance, for braking systems and so on, where there are quite a few alternatives, especially if your position in the automotive field is on higher levels, deluxe cars. You have quite a few alternatives. Cheap producers for IT area. Quite a few, and contended by many different companies. They have a large bargaining power. In other words, a supplier that is in the position to say no to your request, or maybe later. At the other side, you diminishing the risk as soon as you have suppliers that are totally depending on your contracts, on your purchase of. And that's also logic. In between those two areas, you know that strategically you are dealing with companies that they share the same DNA you share. So in other means, they have a lifetime and they have also their own risk. So the risk represented by suppliers stays also in the numbers, in the alternatives you may have. In other words, in a plan B, a contingency plan we may have when conditions for purchasing from historical suppliers are difficult. It happened with pandemic, it happens now, it happened many times in the past. We have better quality in other areas, but logistics, in the cost of logistics is representing a barrier, so that you have to look for an alternatives next to you. And that is depending also on geographical conditions. Easier to do in other countries, for instance, or Europe, than in Italy, or the way geographically Italy is made, and for the infrastructures that Italy owns at the moment. Easy to do politics or just in time in Japan, less easy in Italy. Okay, so the concept that the bargaining power of suppliers is also varying, but is something to take into consideration. And the attitude to consider agreements with suppliers as strategically, very important, strategical asset of the company is not so widespread as you may think. Because seeing for us, as we stay in this classroom, it seems something logical. You need to have a very good contract with all details and so on and covering all the risks. It seems logical. But if you look at contracts, the way they are made with suppliers, most of the times, that's not what you read in the contracts. In other words, if you're dealing with the contract with the suppliers for many years, you develop in a kind of attitude so that you don't consider them as a risk, as a part of the landscape. But they're a company, and they're not part of the landscape. They are there because there is a contract. So having a good contract, sometimes also a contract that is applying penalties for not timely reaction of suppliers or for low quality suppliers, all conditions that are evaluating the risk that the supplier suddenly is breaking a contract are extremely important, but not so applied as you may think. Suppliers definitely represent an asset for a company. Success in Italy, or so-called made in Italy, is based on districts. Districts are definitely a class of companies where there are this deep relationship of and roles, sometimes mixed up, of customer, supplier, supplier, customer. And those relationships made the success of a product or an area. So the integration with suppliers, especially with the inner circle of suppliers, so the one you consider important for your business, is extremely important. And in the suppliers, more and more, currently we just said, we have to consider the effect of IT technology suppliers. The sense that they are producing more and more the conditions, for instance, from the point of view of business continuity, in order to make you able to supply your product. Almost 100% of business nowadays are depending on tools and software platforms. Those tools and software platforms are run on servers, and servers are in data centers. The global continuity conditions that make available the information and the software necessary to develop your daily business are for sure a category of suppliers to insert in bargaining power of suppliers as well as raw materials. Because the fact that you cannot make an invoice, or you cannot make a packing list, or you cannot make a control, is in fact nowadays a condition that may stop the possibility you have to sell and provide services to your customer. So the 5 forces model means that as a strategy for each force, you have tried to figure out, to identify all parties involved, as well as the specific factors that may originate pressure from their side. Second step, evaluating how strong these pressures are in fact, and trying to have a classification system. The idea is having a system that is at least representing 3 possible evaluations. So strong influence, moderate influence, or weak influence. Trying to classify those pressures. And third, try to evaluate countermeasures and whether the 5 forces are supportive or not high profitability of your industry. As you can understand, this model is basically a risk model. And risk is something that is not necessarily something you have to, let's say, something you have to evaluate, of course, but not necessarily implies a reaction from inside. Depicting a scenario, depicting risk concerning the forces, the 5 forces which are affecting in business, may also lead you to the conclusion that, well, there is a risk, but there's nothing I can do in order to moderate this risk. So, in other words, I accept that risk. So, not necessarily this model means that you have to act. You have to classify the risk to decide where you need an actions in order to modify the situation. But sometimes you may also come to the conclusion that you accept that risk the way it is. I'm depending from a designer and I'm providing a product which is highly appreciated in United States. Made in Italy product, the area of design. Complement of for furnishing offices, say mechanism or door, no? Or an aluminium door, or a crystal door. I'm depending from designer who developed the idea, which is still the only one which is able to do that design and to perform the kind of product, to design the product. Is a weakness? Yes, there's something I can do, perhaps not. Therefore, I accept that risk without moderating, because at the moment it's impossible. You're accepting a risk. There is a weakness, sure. Positive point, I know that there is. Negative point, there's nothing I can do at the moment. I selling made in Italy product where I have an alternative. I'm actually depending from a designer, but at the same time, I have now a collaboration with the local university, and my goal is within 5-10 years to hire and to insert in my company designers employed in my company, not external, able to do that. You are, in other words, apply moderation on the risk. So you are not accepting the risk. You are doing something to moderate the risk. Then there is the third category of risk that is so low, there is nothing else you can do to moderate it further. There is a risk that a meteorite will strike my data center. Yes, okay. But I have another data center with disaster recovery system 400 kilometers away. There is a chance that another meteorite at the same time will hit that. Okay, there is, but it's so low and so costly to reduce further the risk that I'm definitely not going to make another contract with another supplier in order to have another data center. There is no need, no point in doing that. So there is no risk zero. Every one of the 5 forces will bring you some risk, but you are going to act only when you need and where you have the resources to do that. You are going to accept what you can't moderate at the moment, and you are going to leave it exactly like it is. What it cannot be considered a further reduced risk, and where the cost of the countermeasure is higher, much higher than the advantages you can get. So the 5 forces model is that: appreciating what you can do, and given a number, a quantity behind what you can do, because we say that in the orange area you can do something. High forces model is a model to say is a moment in a model that can help you to appreciate, to express in quantities what you can really do that area. Okay. Problems and pitfalls, a lot. I tell you that and then we stop for a few minutes. There are a lot of pitfalls, as in every model. First of all, as you notice, the model is static. Since we talked, it's not saying that the air was moved or somewhere, or that the span of the circle changed or whatsoever. It's a static model. Saying since the beginning that reality is not static. So, in other words, under dynamic conditions, and all markets more or less are dynamic, under very dynamic conditions, five forces model is less useful because structure of industries, the competitive behavior, they are jointly determining that all underlying conditions concerning technology, demand, cost, and so on are changing as well. Okay, so it stays a model. As every model, so we study in strategy, it helps you to define reality, but is a model. Okay, it's like if you are basing the conclusion only on pictures, videos are definitely better. So it's an image of the reality of a certain situation, a certain time, no more than. Okay, and the second limit of the model is the fact that it's assuming that there is a competition, so with newcomers or competitors or substitute products, but if the environment is hyper competitive, so it's really a red ocean full of competitors, the path of creation of new products, the path of actions of competitors, the path of creating and destroying new competitive advantage is so high that may very quick alter this situation. So the model is a model, is static, and as every model should help you to take decisions, and then you have to support with other data. But may help you to give priorities, which is already something important. At the other side, it's true that every model has a limit, but also your decision capacity and the time that is given to you to make decision is limited. So, of course, every decision we make is an approximation. A good theoretical decision based on the analysis of 100% of data you may have at your disposal is a wrong decision because it will come too late. So a model helps you to give an approximation of reality. The same for the structure of your company. The model is assuming that you stay in the center and that your company structure is always the same in the time of your analysis. But this also may be not completely true, because the structure of company is rather unstable. The lifetime of the company in Italy is 13 years, and it's not so much difference also international level. And in 13 years, a lot of things change. So the fact that a company is there in the center, like a rock, is depicting also an approximation of reality. conditional and the resources available for the companies today may be completely different within 6 months or within 1 year, as well as the capacity of management, because they are also human beings and they may change. So these conditions are not solid as a rock. It's also an approximation. Okay. Okay, let's make break. And it's 5:26, so 10 minutes and we start all over again. Okay. I share only part of this and still model.
And also, I wanted to know what will be the final exam structure.
It's analysis of a business case. Written.
It will be a written answer to the business case. Won't be an open question.
Open question. Yeah.
Okay, then we'll give a business case and we have to make strategy for
Yes.
no projects for this.
No.
This is